Hello, friends. This is another episode being presented in two parts. Part 1 was recorded a few months ago, and Part 2, a follow-up, was recorded just a few days ago. Enjoy. Welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello, friends. Today on the show, she's a professor of psychology and happiness researcher at James Madison University in Virginia. There, she focuses on communication in the digital age and the issues of addiction and reliance on social media. She also loves travel and even incorporates it into her curriculum. Having been all around the globe, she's also a fellow Moonbird. How cool. Her passion for travel in combination with her career led her to write a book called The Happy Traveler, Unpacking the Secrets of Better Vacations. I've read it myself, and I truly believe that it should be mandatory reading for anyone thinking about taking a trip. Today, we're going to talk about life, travel in the modern age, dig into some of the psychology that goes into our vacation decisions, and find out how we can all be not only better travelers, but better human beings. Please welcome, zooming in from Virginia, Dr. Jaime Kurtz. Jaime, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So first question is, where are you from?
I am originally from Reading, Pennsylvania, which is maybe an hour and a half from Philadelphia.
What was little Jaime like when you were growing up?
Little Jaime was bookish and restless. You see a theme here, maybe. And also just really wanted to be liked, like desperately wanted to be popular and be liked and please people.
And where do you think that came from?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure. That's a question for my therapist, maybe. But yeah, I remember writing. Maybe because I have a lot of old diaries that I kept as a kid that were just like analyzing where I stood with friend groups and did I do something to displease someone and how can I get this person to like me more? And that just seemed like a really big focus.
Did you guys travel when you were growing up? Because I'm curious where the love of travel kind of started.
We did not travel, no. My whole family were big homebodies and very blue-collar kind of background. So travel just seemed like a luxury no, I'm not even going to say that. It was a waste of money, I think. It was thought of as a waste of money. So we went to a KOA campground that was down the road, maybe 20 minutes. And my uncle had a pop-up camper, and we'd spend a couple nights there every now and then. We'd go to, day trips to the amusement park. One time we went to Wildwood, New Jersey, to the ocean or down the shore, as they say, because I think my parents thought we should see the ocean as kids. Travel was not really something that we did.
Is there any specific memory you have of when you first went, oh, wow, I love this and I want to keep doing this?
I guess I just started to equate travel with freedom, and I was always seeking escape and freedom. And I remember just even taking my mom's car back and forth to college, which was 45 minutes away, to visit a friend over the summer, and just that feeling of freedom when I would be on the road. And I just started getting fascinated by road trips and the freedom of the open road. And then that gradually transferred to kind of bigger travel, international travel. But yeah, it was definitely something that I came to on my own. And my mom and my brother have come around to travel now as we've all gotten older and maybe have a little bit more disposable income to do that. But it definitely it seemed like a waste of money, I think, was how it was framed. Like, why would you, if you could save that money, why would you spend it on a trip?
Have you been able to travel with your parents?
Well, my dad passed away about 12 years ago. But my mom, she went on 2 cross-country road trips with me, and we recently did a speaking tour. So I do some speaking gigs. And we started in North Dakota, in Fargo, North Dakota, and ended up in Alaska.
Wow.
We didn't fly to Alaska, but we drove from North Dakota to Idaho and then flew to Alaska, and it was 3 weeks on the road. So she's been to like 30 states in the
fantastic.
last Yeah, in the last maybe 10 years, which is just really fun.
I'll say I lost my father in 2018, but he and I got to take the road trip across the country together and have several trips together. And those were the things I look back on quite fondly now as an adult. And I'm just so grateful that I had those experiences, you know?
Yeah, that's one reason why we do it, right? For these memories and these connections that you can't really get anywhere else.
Why a focus on happiness? And was there something that inspired that decision in particular?
Well, when I was in graduate school at the University of Virginia, it was really becoming a popular topic. So this area of positive psychology hadn't really been formalized before. And it had just become this huge movement in the field of psychology. And like, instead of figuring out what's wrong with people and how can we fix it, can we help people who maybe aren't depressed or suffering from some clinical disorder? Is there a way that they can all live happier lives and more meaningful lives? So I was really taken by that idea. I had never really thought about that before as something that we could study. And also, they say research is me search. So I was asking some of those questions of myself.
I've never heard that expression before. That's great.
Oh, really? So yeah, looking back now with perspective, I'm like, yeah, I really kind of wanted to figure that stuff out at that time in life as well. And I mean, we still always are thinking about those things, but at that time it just really, really resonated.
Well, it's interesting because this brings up something that I'm very passionate about, which is the difference between contentment and happiness. And I think how they get confused by social media and people in general, in that my personal belief is that happiness is an emotional state, whereas content is a state of being, and that you can have a contented life where you feel very at peace with most things. And in that contented state of being, you can experience happiness. But happiness is just an emotion like sadness and other things. Whereas I think our social media and the world today is like, if you're not happy, you're doing something wrong and there's something wrong with you. And it's like, no, happiness is not a constant state of mind 24 hours a day, Well, I'd love to ask you about this because I feel like at least there's this pressure of like, if you're not living your best life all the time and happy, then somehow you're failing at life. Do you experience this in your classrooms how do you feel about it?
I do experience it. And I've experienced it myself, to be honest, like as somebody who studies happiness and kind of thinks about it a lot and knows a lot about it, knows the research. If you're not happy all the time, you're like, if I can't be happy, what hope is there for anyone else? Like, I know all this research and think I'm a pretty dispositionally positive person. And yeah, you can start to really obsess about it. Why am I not happy right now? Why am I not happy? I'm doing everything. When I moved to Santa Monica, as I mentioned before, in California on the beach, I mean, I lived, a mile from the beach or something, and every day was beautiful. And I had all this independence and all these new adventures. And that was a ton of pressure. Like, why am I not happy? What else could there be? So yeah, I think it is a problem of our culture for sure. And it is a danger of studying happiness also. And I do see it in students, but what I see more in students is anxiety. And maybe part of what drives their anxiety is this need to be happy all the time or this pressure. But I think also just the social media, the high standards that are being set by these perfectly curated images that they see can't really help. And the uncertainty about careers and finances and all of these concerns. I think for many of them, happiness feels like a far off goal.
Well, I have a two-part question to that. One is, do you feel that these issues are anything new, or are they the same issues that people have been dealing with for generations? And two, do you feel that the modern digital age has changed your particular field of psychology in comparison to when you first started before maybe all the internet and the iPhones and all that stuff?
So to the first question, it's a really hard one to answer because it's gotten so much easier to talk about anxiety and stress in that population, whereas in previous years, people might have just shoved it under the rug or didn't feel comfortable talking about it. So I'm just not sure if it's become more normalized or if it's like a true increase in the problem. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's a really tough one to answer. But I do think that what's happening is that students kind of feed into one another's anxiety. So how are you? Oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. I have so much going on. Oh my gosh, me too. And then if you're not stressed, that starts to feel like a problem. Like, what am I not doing that everyone else is doing? What am I not working hard enough at? So then it it just perpetuates and increases the problem even more.
So what do you do to try to make people feel better about things and say, hey, it's okay. Stop stressing. Stop feeling so anxious about everything. Your life is good, and so are you.
I try to acknowledge their feelings as legitimate, but give them tools to manage it. So we talk a lot about how stress is a subjective response, right? Some people have a ton of messy nonsense going on in their lives and they seem pretty calm and cool, collected. And there are some people who, they have a paper to write and they just can't handle it. So it's very subjective. So the way that we respond to stress is part of the story, right? So what do you do when you're stressed? Do you bottle it up? Do you avoid the stressor, which makes it even worse? Or do you call a friend? Do you get some exercise? Do you manage your time well? So we try to talk about stress management strategies as opposed to just like telling them that their stress isn't legitimate.
Have you witnessed positive change in this? I would like to think you do.
Mm-hmm. I do, but it is a practice. You have to kind of keep at it and say you're doing meditation or you're doing kind of cognitive behavioral strategies of questioning your disabling thought patterns. You can't just do it once because I told you to, or it was a class exercise. Like you really have to do it regularly. So if the students, I'd like to think if they keep at it as a practice and believe in it, it will be effective.
Because my partner is an actor and she works in the business, she's constantly doing what they call the work, which is this, soul level understanding and exploration of emotion and where it all comes from and why things are. And they always use this phrase, be present. And so it has become a bit of a catchphrase for actors in that, when their performance doesn't feel real, that's because they're not being present. And so constantly being surrounded by that, I wonder in your field, if this is something that comes up with, do you feel kids today are present in what they do? Do you see a pattern there, or is there any kind of data of whether they are less present than they used to be or more present than they used to be?
Yeah, I don't have any data, but I know what I see, and I don't think they're very present. You give people... I teach a 2.5-hour class, for instance, and as soon as I give them a break halfway through, phones immediately come out. We can't sit with ourselves for any amount of time. I see people, I remember not too long ago, there was this rainbow across campus. It was beautiful. And I looked around at the students and everyone's down on their phone, not even taking pictures of it, but just they were too distracted by whatever input they were getting to even look around. And it just struck me as sad. Not to say that I don't do the same from time to time, but I do think it's becoming even more and more of an issue.
Well, are you able to turn
are
you able to turn your phone off without anxiety or fear of missing out on something, et cetera?
I'm not very good at that. No, I worry about, somebody trying to get a hold of me. Is what am I missing? And I did, turn off Facebook once for a week, and I did not miss it. I really didn't miss it.
Yeah.
And I think that it would be a really good thing to do to limit social media contact.
I agree, actually.
Especially over the last week. All it is the election and coronavirus.
Yeah.
It's all it is like, why do I feel compelled to scroll through this constantly? But I guess it's just a habit. It's like a reflex.
Let's talk about your book. It is awesome. And I really meant what I said. Yeah. And I meant when I said in the intro that anyone who ever wants to travel should read your book, period. The Happy Traveler by Dr. Jaime Kurtz. People, go pick up a copy on Amazon. I hope you're flooded with requests for the book now.
I hope so too.
In your book, you mentioned that you've been to 30 countries and 45 U.S. states. I have a little bit of country envy. I've been to about 20 and 40 U.S. states, so I'm catching up to you, Kurtz.
I'm at 48 states now.
I was going to say, has your number gone up since you wrote it?
Yeah. I've added at least 2 countries, including Australia, so that's a whole continent.
Well done.
And then I've added North Dakota, Alaska, a couple states. So now all that's left is I have 3 to go. Hawaii, Oklahoma, and Mississippi are the only ones.
Well, they miss you and they want you to come visit. So get on that. So the U.S. currently officially acknowledges 195 countries worldwide. And I think it would be cool to say that I've seen at least half. What's your goal?
Ooh. I hadn't thought about it until just now. A lot of the countries I've checked off are small European countries, and it's easy to just kind of hop around from place to place. But I'd love to go to some places like South America. Yeah, I don't know. Let's say half. Let's say half, just for the sake of argument.
All right. Well, getting back to the book, what compelled you to want to write it?
I was noticing that I was not enjoying my travels. In short, I was finally in this place in life where I could do all the traveling that I had dreamed of doing for much of my 20s and early 30s. And, I had some time, I had some money, and really the only task I had was to design an amazing experience for myself, right? That's kind of what traveling is all about.
Sure.
And I'm a happiness researcher. Like, I should have been up to the challenge. And I would go on these trips that I spent a lot of time and money planning and paying for, and just would feel lonely, antsy. I wasn't enjoying myself as much as I had expected. And I started thinking about what I knew about psychology and decision making, money spending, relationships, and thought, there's really a lot to say about how to design a good vacation.
Absolutely.
And maybe if I write this book, I'll learn to do it better myself too.
Well, hands down, I mean, you covered so many subjects, which I'm going to be asking you some things here in a minute about. But what was fascinating to me is that, I've been traveling most of my life. But what's fascinating to me is reading your book and sitting there going, oh, yep. Oh, that's absolutely that you just put into words this thing that I've been feeling. And, oh, yep, we do that now. And so many of the lessons I learned over the last 20 years, especially, traveling as a professional, you just validated and put into fantastic wording. So first, congrats. Secondly, I don't think people realize when I plug the book, I really mean it. Like, I don't get paid to do that. And I think it's a manual for travel that all human beings should really, really look at. They will be a happy traveler and having much better experiences if they take your advice.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It means a lot to me.
Can you explain for our listeners what hedonic adaptation is?
Yes. Hedonic adaptation is just a really fancy way of saying that we get used to stuff that we see all the time, right? So, gosh, the view out your backyard window, foods that you eat all the time, your commute, if you pass something interesting on your commute, after a while, you just kind of stop noticing it. Right? Even some qualities of your friends and family. Maybe you miss these things tremendously when you're not together, but when you see them every day, it's very easy to just not really pay that much attention, right? So that makes happiness in everyday life kind of a challenge, because most of our everyday lives are full of the same things. And as nice as they might be, it can just get really hard to notice and appreciate them over time. So one reason travel is so great is because you tend to see totally new things that wow you, because they're just because they're new.
But let's say you're traveling, because this happened to us. We were overseas. We were in Europe for 3 weeks. And at some point, you've walked around the same European city now for 2 weeks. You've started to get used to the path to the bakery or whatever. And you start to feel these things that the wow factor of the first few days you were there has started to wear off a little bit. And you can see how people settle into wherever they live. So when you're traveling and you're out there in the world, and I mean, just in life in general, what are some ways that you think people can actually combat this to still try and at least appreciate what they have around them?
Yeah, it's a real challenge of extended travel, definitely. So I think gratitude, right? So, expressing gratitude, writing in a journal is a kind of a classic about all the things that you most appreciate. If you are so inclined, like drawing or sketching a place helps you see it more deeply and think about it, just gets you to look. Sharing it with someone else definitely enhances the experience. Talk about it with someone else. What do you like best about this place, right? Get some history, learn about it. What's the background of that building? Who built it? When? Why? That can help it seem more special. So there are things you can do, but it's hard. I was in Florence, Italy, about a year and a half ago with a student group, and I lived there for 3 months. So this was like a dream come true.
Awesome.
And it was pretty great. And about 3 weeks into it, only 3 weeks or so, I was walking with the students across the Arno River, and 2 bridges down was the famous Ponte Vecchio Bridge that It's iconic. People fly there from all over the world to see it. It's just incredible. And I'm talking with these students about some nonsense, like nothing profound. And I realized that we didn't even look. Like, we didn't even look at it after just 3 weeks. It had become so ordinary, and it made me really sad. And I told them, like, you guys, like, we just did. And we're always focusing on the next thing, on, what's for lunch, or what are we doing today, or my feet hurt, or all those things just command our attention. And these wonderful things can just fade into the background. So,
well, do you think that's just part of being human, and that's just something inescapable?
I think it's part of being human, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that it's inescapable, but I think it's very hard to overcome. Right. It's built into our DNA from like an evolutionary perspective. It's healthy to always be looking for things that are changing, things that are new. Right. A more dramatic example is, looking at the speeding cars coming near us is probably more important than looking at the bridge, which, beautiful as it is, like, doesn't change and doesn't affect our lives in any meaningful way. But just always looking for what's new and different is probably, I think, related to survival.
Interesting. Well, I want to talk about the tourism industry a bit, because something you wrote in your book struck me. I'm going to quote you. You said, quote, "In essence, the tourism industry perpetuates the impact bias, the pervasive belief that an emotional event will affect us for longer than it actually does. It's not in our nature to be so consistently joyful." And along those lines, I think that the tourism industry is not willing to show people how things really are because they fear, of course, losing money. And I am actually a believer in the opposite of that if you tell people the truth, and it was funny because I have a post on my website about what it's really like to visit the Mona Lisa and the crazy people and the heat and but if you tell people what these things are actually really like, so that they have proper expectations before they go there, people are still going to want to see the Mona Lisa no matter what, even if it's sweaty and people are bumping into you and whatever. They still want to go see the Taj Mahal, even if there's 25,000 people outside. So I think if these tourism industries would start showing people the truth, I think they'd still make as much money or even more, because people will feel like they're not being deceived or lied to.
Yeah, I agree. I think people will still want to go. Like you said, a lot of us, we want to check those boxes off, even if it's going to be a little unpleasant. And is there a way to find the beauty in the 25,000 people at the Taj Mahal? Like, that seems kind of cool, actually. Like, you're in this collective experience with...
Yeah, you're communing with all these other humans from all over the world.
Right. So I don't think I'd be put off by that. But yeah, if I went in expecting to have the place to myself and it was 25,000 people, I would feel a little deceived. I'd feel disappointed. And in terms of profit for the industry, I might not be as inclined to travel. I might be like, you know what, I'm just going to stay home because travel is kind of a ripoff. I'm exhausted.
Yes, and in your book you talk about, like, you go have a bad experience, and then all of a sudden you're going to go home and go, well, fuck this, I'm going to stay home and Poughkeepsie, New York, and just work my job and go to Niagara Falls for the weekend or whatever. Like, I don't think people should be discouraged to travel by having those bad experiences because they were misled, and that's kind of a passion of mine, is not misleading people. And it's really I'm very passionate about people telling the truth, and I want there to be truth in travel and in education.
I've been investigating this Rainbow Mountain. Have you seen this Rainbow Mountain? It's in Peru, I think.
No.
And oh my gosh, it's on Instagram a lot, and it's this mountain that you trek to. I mean, it's a journey to get there. And it's beautiful, all these different stripes of color that you can't imagine like exists in nature. And I just saw it on Facebook again last night, and I was reading about it, and somebody said, most of those pictures are doctored. Like, it doesn't actually look like that. It's not exactly fake, and I did feel, to go back to that idea of, the deception of the travel industry, like, if I had made that trip to see that, and I'm sure I would have gotten something good out of it, something else out of it besides just looking at this mountain, but still I'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do I know you mentioned in the book also seeing our own places we live with new eyes when we lived there for so long. Like, I live in Los Angeles, right? And people come from all over the world to see this place. But after 20 years, I'm like, You know,
Yeah.
you want to go to Hollywood? Here's the car keys. No thanks. You know. But anyway, so how do people, in your opinion, what are some tips you have for people to kind of renew the place they live and see it through fresh eyes, if possible?
Well, I will tell you what's happening with me right now. The fact that my mom just moved here and I've lived in Charlottesville since 2000, and it's with a little stint out west for 4 years. But by and large, I've lived here, and it's a small town. It's lovely. We have wineries, we have history, we have mountains, we have hiking, we have a charming downtown, university. We have all these things, but it's a small town, and it's hard to have that sense of wonder. And just having a new person to show it to all the time is hugely revitalizing. Like just taking her to, a winery that I think is pretty, but it's just kind of gotten ordinary, and she's like, wow, this is just amazing. I can't believe you can come here anytime. Like you can just come here anytime. This is living. She just loves it so much. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. So anyway, showing the place to somebody new, especially somebody who just gets easily wowed, is wonderful. I love it.
I'm curious, do you believe in geographical happiness in the sense of, for instance, I grew up in Ohio with 4 seasons, and being in LA for so long, I really miss fall and winter quite a bit. And I'm feeling as I get older and older, I want to go back towards that side of the country, or that a part of the world that has those things, because I'm missing those geographical experiences and the way.
Yeah, I would love to do some research on this, but I just from personal experience, when I lived in LA for that time, at first it was amazing. Like every day is beautiful, but then it would get to be winter and I'd go to Starbucks and they'd have Christmas cups. And I'm like so confused, and all my memories kind of got fuzzy because I couldn't link them to the weather. So I was like, wait, when did that happen? When did I last see you? Like I could it was all just a muddle. And also there was no real motivation to enjoy the weather because you knew that the next day was going to be wonderful too. And you could just wait. So it was very easy to be lazy and say, not go to the beach or not go hiking. And then after I lived out there for 3 years, I moved up to Portland, Oregon for just 1 year. And it was totally the opposite. When there was a sunny day, everybody was out just soaking it up and making the most of it because you didn't know when you'd get another one. So, and now I live in a place that's a little bit more kind of in the middle, but yeah, I think there's something to savor in each season, and just having that variation is fun. It's
well,
exciting.
I think it's very important to the concept of the passage of time for me personally. Maybe someone who grew up in California would feel differently because I think they're more sensitive to the slight, climatological change in California because there is one. But I feel like for me, I used to feel time. And then out here, you live and you're doing your thing. And then suddenly you look up at a calendar and you go, wait, that was 6 years ago? And it's such a shock to the system how much time has gone by at some point. I can't believe I've been here 20 years, I'll be honest.
Wow, yeah. I think weather helps us, changing of seasons helps us mark time.
Yeah. Well, in your book, you talk about allocentric versus psychocentric travelers and what those things mean. I know they're psychology concepts. So for the listeners, you said allocentric travelers crave adventure and novelty, whereas psychocentric travelers prioritize familiarity, structure, and security, and crave escape and relaxation. My 2 questions for you are, 1, you said in the book that you're an allocentric introvert. Is that still true? And 2, do you think that there's any statistics to say that the more people travel, the more allocentric they become? Yeah,
I'll speak to the second question first. There are some data showing that. So, when you're first starting out and traveling, you are a little bit more reserved in the things that you'll try and the extent to which you'll kind of branch out, just on average. And then you get more and more comfortable and you're more and more inclined to branch out and do more exciting, novel, challenging things. So yeah, that can certainly happen.
Okay.
And the first question again?
You said in the book that you're an allocentric introvert. Is that still true?
Yes. Yeah. If I could change something about myself as a traveler, I would be more inclined to talk to people. Because I think that that's hugely important. And when I'm with a friend who is really naturally good at that, I have such a better time. You just connect with people, you hear their stories, you have so many great memories and laughs to look back on through connections, through people, and you get more recommendations, and it's wonderful. I am not that good at that myself.
Well, why do you think that is?
I think that's something to reflect on. I'm not really sure.
That'll be for Jaime's second episode appearance on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm writing down things I want to ask my therapist. So that's another one.
Okay. Great. I'm so glad that I could facilitate help in your life.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Of all your travels, what's been your most budget-friendly but awesome experience you've had, do you think?
Southeast Asia, definitely. Once you're there, I mean, the flight can be a little costly, but once you're there, it's incredibly inexpensive, and the food is wonderful, and many of the accommodations are lovely. And it's just so fun to walk around and look at things because it's so different, it's so exotic, and you can end up spending very little money and have a really wonderful time. So I'd say Southeast Asia for anybody looking for a great budget destination, especially if you can stay a little while.
In your book, you basically talk about the fact that there's more that unites us than divides us. This is something I also wholeheartedly believe. Yet we live in a world where certain people want to create divisiveness, and I think we have to stop them and combat the fear of the unknown and seek to better understand one another. I really believe travel is a huge way to do that. What are some ways in everyday life you think people can remind each other that there is more that unites us as human beings than divides us?
I think the easiest thing to do is just talk to people. Just ask people questions, hear their stories, people that you might not come into contact with normally, but I think that's kind of number one. And if you can go to some other part of the world to do that, that's a wonderful thing, a wonderful privilege, but I don't think it's exclusive to travel.
Let's talk about life in the big picture. Where do you think you're going to be when you're 60, 70, 80 years old?
Well, I'd certainly like to think that I am still traveling. I have this fantasy that maybe not in the next 10 years, but at some point down the road, I want to do one of those walking trips where you just walk and walk. Like the most famous is the Camino Santiago in Spain, but you can walk and walk through Ireland and Scotland on these paths, and people take your stuff from place to place for you. And I just love the idea of that.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I know this woman in Charlottesville who she's maybe in her 70s. She's a marathon runner. Like, she's just amazing. And she's always going on these walking trips. And every time she talks about one, I'm like, I want to do that. So, I would like to be walking. I imagine I will still be teaching psychology, at least into my 60s. And, continuing to take students. I love to take students traveling. So I'm fingers crossed taking students to Scandinavia in June, if everything works out. And we study happiness, and I love that. I love showing them, trying to instill the love of travel in students. So I would love to kind of leave that legacy.
When you look at the students that you have today, how do you feel looking back at those generations versus the generation of today? Are you hopeful for the world? Are you concerned for the world?
I am hopeful for the world.
I love the hesitation.
I mean, they're different than we were in some ways. I mean, in some ways, we all kind of want the same thing.
But do you think the older generation, said the same thing about us when we were kids? They're different.
Oh, that's such a hard question. Yeah, I think there was a time maybe 10 years ago when the job market, the economy had crashed. The student debt is ridiculous. But at that time, there were also no jobs. And I was really worried for them then. And now it seems like things are kind of coming back around, and there are jobs and opportunities for the kids, so they don't seem so despondent anymore. I think the kids will be all right.
Do you think there's a difference in overall travel experiences between the genders?
Yes. Just using study abroad as an example, we have so many more women who want to go and study abroad. So this class that I'm taking to Scandinavia, for instance, we have 3 men and 11 women, and I really have to scrounge to get some guys. When I went to Italy with JMU, my university, we had 25 women and 3 men, I think.
Wow.
So, yeah. And
why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it is that it was the programs. One's a psychology program and one was hospitality management. And those are just majors that attract more women. So that's not all that interesting. But just in general, the numbers skew a little bit toward females. And I don't have a great answer for that, honestly.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Maybe that's a subject for your next research paper.
Could be. Why aren't guys that interested? The guys that do take it are really enthusiastic.
Well, yeah, they've got 25 women around them. How could they not be?
Well, yeah. True.
What's the biggest challenge that you think you face as a professor?
This is becoming less of an issue as I get older, but when I was starting out for the first 10 or so years, I wanting to be liked so much. And sometimes you can't be liked. Sometimes you have to be a hard ass, and trying to find that balance and trying to kind of be okay with people not liking me. I said when I was a little kid, I cared a lot about being liked, and I guess I still do. Like sometimes being effective as a teacher involves being a little harsh and telling people things they don't want to know. So that's been a challenge, and it still is.
Well, don't you think that as a professor is in some ways, they are an educator, a psychologist, and a parent, and there's still on some level at least the professors I had, there was a level of gentle nudging and parenting from a distant person. Basically, it's not your family, but they were able to guide with I think if they're, if they care, they are able to guide with a gentle hand and choosing love as the impetus for that guidance, and saying, hey, I see you from further down the road. And so anyway, I say this because any good parent, I believe, takes the health and well-being of the child into the priority role before they want to be their friend. And one of the greatest fathers I ever met in my life, a friend of mine who's a dad, he said, right now when my kids are growing up, I'm their father. Eventually I'll become their friend. And I just thought that was a beautiful way of saying that. So inherent in that, of course, is you're not going to be liked when you're the parent, and you're not going to be liked sometimes when you're the professor that has to play the parent role, or the one that's handing out homework and stuff like that, So I think it might be inherent in the job. I mean, look, I'm not a professor, so I can't say for sure. I'm just speculating from the outside.
Yeah, that resonates. That definitely resonates.
Yeah, so don't worry about being liked. Just keep being an awesome professor.
The professors who are the most well-liked don't seem to worry too much about being liked. Like they're just doing their job and being passionate about what they're teaching and being respectful of their students, but being that harsh voice when need be. And I think students like that. They like the boundaries and they like the feedback. So what's my problem?
I guess another question for your therapist, right?
There we go. I'm writing it down.
Outside of travel and your work and family, your career, loved ones, the obvious things, what are you most passionate about in life?
Outside of all of that, I love running, long distance running. So I've run 12 marathons. And
have you done one of those European, like run over the...
I wish I could say I have, but no, I've done a couple marathons in Europe, but not in the great outdoors outside of a city. I mean, I follow some of these mountain runners on Instagram, and it looks incredible to just be up there hopping around like a mountain goat. Just looks really amazing.
What is it about running that you're so passionate about?
I think the feeling of freedom, the feeling of being an introvert and just kind of being out there by myself.
Now, Jaime, there is a repeated pattern of freedom in things you say, which is great. I am a free spirit as well.
Like I couldn't stand to be on a treadmill, or I don't even like gyms very much, but I just love being outside, and I really like data. So sort of seeing how many miles did I run and how fast, and looking at the GPS and all of that. I also like cycling, although I'm getting nervous about cycling on roads and with cars and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, same reasons. And I love just seeing stuff. And I think it's a nice way to savor where you live and to be present where you live at a slower pace.
So you've mentioned SAVOR a couple of times. I know in your book you have the acronym for SAVOR: slow down, attend, value, open up and out, and reflect. Would you like to tell everyone how awesome it is?
It's very awesome.
And could you tell them why it's awesome?
Why savoring is awesome?
Yes. And how important it is.
Because, oh my gosh, how do you take joy in anything if you don't notice it and appreciate it, right? Like life can pass you by if you don't savor it, if you don't notice it. You can have amazing things all around you, but if you don't pay any attention, they're not going to really make you feel good. So savoring, it takes some energy. It takes focus. It maybe takes practice, but it is a really important psychological process if you want to be a happy person. So savoring, we can practice it. We can get better at it.
Do you believe in love?
I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
And do you have love in your life, Jaime?
I do. I have a girlfriend who is wonderful.
Awesome.
And she is the best travel companion I've ever had. And we went to Morocco. We went to Australia. We went to Ohio last year at this time. We did a road trip around Ohio.
Where? That's I'm from there. What area?
We went to Toledo, Lima, Cincinnati, and Columbus.
Nice. And
it was a speaking tour. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, Ohio's beautiful.
It was very cold. It was very, very cold.
Wait, when were you there?
This time last year, but for some reason it was just a real cold snap.
No, Ohio has 1,612 months of winter every year. What was your favorite childhood book? I
loved the Babysitter's Club books. These are not like terribly, they're not like literature, but I love the Babysitter's Club series. There was one every month and I couldn't wait to get it. And I just loved them. So
there's nothing wrong with that. When I was a young boy, it was the Choose Your Own Adventure books. Those are my favorites.
Yeah, I had a bunch of those too. Those were dark.
Some of them, yeah.
Some of them were really dark. Like you took a wrong turn and you I remember one was you got buried alive in a cave.
I mean,
jeez.
But see, if you did them right, you read ahead and cheated and looked at what the options were.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I'm not going to choose that page.
You would never do that.
Yeah. So I'm going to set you up with a scenario. You're home with the flu and you're sitting on the couch and you don't feel good. You're flipping through the channels on the TV and a movie comes on. And you're like, oh, this is my favorite. I love to watch this movie. And it's just your favorite, make you feel good when you're not feeling good movie. What do you think that would be?
Pretty Woman.
Why is that?
Every time I'm scanning the channels and Pretty Woman is on, I have to watch it. It's like always. It just makes me happy.
Okay.
I love the sort of late 80s or so feel of it, the aesthetics, the outfits. I love when Julia Roberts tells off that woman in the clothing store and Richard Gere is so cute and it's just great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When you look back on your life right now, how have your priorities changed since you were, 15, 20, 30? How do you feel? Are you any different?
I would say that I've gotten much more focus on relationships as a priority in my life. When I was 20s and 30s, I was very career focused and also kind of had the wanderlust and was fine just to move somewhere new by myself and start over. And I was actually really excited about that, the idea of reinventing yourself in a new place. And now I would not want to do that. That does not appeal to me anymore. I love going new places, but the idea of just starting over without any community is not in any way interesting. So
do you like nesting and having a place of your own and all that?
I do. Yeah.
If you could travel back in time right now and meet up with 20-year-old Jaime for a cup of coffee, what would you tell her?
How many things can I pick?
Top two.
Top two. I would say don't be so damn cocky. You don't know everything. I say that again because of old diaries where I recently found the diary I kept in college and everyone was telling me how smart I was and I'm going to go to graduate school and I'm going to be a professor. And I was you couldn't teach me. You couldn't tell me anything. I knew everything and it was kind of obnoxious. And I went to graduate school and I didn't realize how little I knew about navigating academia and being in that world. And I just wish I would have asked more questions, I guess, and realized I didn't know everything. That's thing one.
Okay.
And then I would also say listen to your gut, listen to your heart about your life decisions instead of doing what you think you should do.
Very good advice.
Oh,
I think
thanks.
that applies to everyone.
Yeah.
Well, Jaime, let's talk about my favorite subject, which is food.
Okay.
You mentioned to me off record that you had pizza in Rome by the Pantheon in 12th grade.
I did.
Is that your favorite meal you've had abroad, do you think?
Oh my gosh, that is such a hard question.
I know.
But it's a very distinct memory because I had spent the day with this friend. We had taken art history and we fell in love with art history and we studied the Pantheon. And if you've been to Rome, it's kind of confusing and kind of a maze. And we had been looking for this building for, it felt like hours and hours. It probably was not, but we were exhausted and we're like, where in the hell are we? We turned this little corner. It was like an alley and the Pantheon was right there. I mean,
That's
it was
cool.
right in front of us. And we were like, oh my gosh. And there was a little cafe that we sat down at and just ate these pizzas and looked at it. And it's just such a distinct memory.
What kind of pizza did you have?
Margarita.
Is that your favorite?
A thin crust. Yeah, I think I like a margarita pizza. I like pepperoni. I like salami. I like not mushrooms. And it was also the cheapest because we were on a very strict budget. So, but it was just such a wonderful memory. But I've had so many good meals and some fancy meals that.
Wait, I wanted to ask you a quick question about the pizza. So, circling back to some stuff we talked about earlier, do you think that the pizza tasted so good because of the circumstances surrounding it? Like if you went back there and you lived by the Pantheon and you were there and you went there once a week for pizza, after a few months, would it be like, oh, this pizza is just okay? Or do you think it would still taste great?
I think it would probably be very ordinary. Yeah, I actually did go back there about 2 years ago when I was in Rome for the day. I'm like, I'm going to find that pizza place. And I wasn't totally sure. There are just so many restaurants on that square, so I'm not sure if I found the exact one. But I got the same pizza and sat down and ate it. And I mean, it was good, but it wasn't, it was more the whole experience. It was the fact that we were exhausted and sitting down felt so great. It was that we were looking at this amazing building and sharing this experience together. I think it was all of those pieces together.
Are there any particular foods that you have found abroad that you loved so much that you found the recipe for and try to recreate at home?
Yeah. So when I was living in Florence, there was this little restaurant on the square near where I was living called the Osteria Santo Spirito. And they had a dish, it's a common dish in Tuscany called papa alla pomodoro. And it's essentially a way to use up old bread. Like it's nothing glamorous, but when you have stale bread, you cook it into a stew with tomatoes, basil, olive oil, and garlic. I think that's it. And it's like this goopy red stuff.
Sounds
but
amazing.
that was if you have to have good ingredients. So you have to, every ingredient has to be really, really great. But I did try to make it about a year ago, and I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I want to make it again really soon.
I would love if you would email me that recipe. That would be awesome.
Okay.
Matter of fact, there's a food section on the website coming later this year, and if you do send me the recipe, I will add it to my food section and link to you directly.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I will do it.
I have a question I love to ask the people I interview, which is this. Imagine for a minute that you get to sit down in a very nice old pub and you get to have a drink with anybody throughout all of human history, alive or dead, and you can sit with them for 4 hours. What drink would you have and who would you talk to?
Oh man, this is so hard. I would have bourbon. That's something I know for sure. I'd have some kind of bourbon drink. And I think some kind of, I've never thought about this before. So
Great.
I don't have a specific person in mind, but I'm sure this person exists. Like a woman trailblazer who traveled the world and forged her own path and had to push back against a lot of social norms about gender and, but just kind of did that and was very, very brave. And whoever that woman is, I want to hang out with her.
Could be someone from Amelia Earhart.
Like Amelia Earhart. Yeah.
Amelia Earhart. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
A bourbon with Amelia Earhart.
A bourbon with Amelia Earhart.
If you were 100 years old and looking back on your entire existence, what do you think a complete life looks like to you?
A complete life to me is having love and following your heart, not just doing what you're told or what society tells you, and looking back and feeling like, yeah, I lived an authentic life and I was grateful for it. I didn't, let it pass me by without acknowledging it, acknowledging my fortune, my good fortune, and using your health, using your body. So I don't want to look back and think, I was so fit and healthy at one time in my life and I just kind of sat on my ass. Because there will be a time when, things get harder to do. So I want to feel like I kind of used what I had when I had it.
Well, thank you very much. The last thing I like to do with all of my guests is play a little game I have called 299 Philosophical and Life Questions with Moonbird.
Okay.
I've collected 299 of the coolest philosophical and life questions from the internet and family and friends. And you get to pick two numbers from 1 to 299, and I'm going to read you those two questions. Pressure's on, Dr. Jaime Kurtz.
All right. I will pick 47. And I will choose 42.
42 and 47. Which one do you want first?
47.
47. What is the craziest thing you've ever done, and would you do it again?
Oh, man.
That you're willing to talk about. I should put that as an addendum.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, man, there's so many things I could say. Okay. I guess that just moving across the country and not knowing anybody, and moving in with some random guy that I met on Craigslist as a roommate, who turned out to be very nice.
Good.
Yeah, looking back, that was a little bold.
Would you do it again?
At that age, yeah. At this age, no.
Okay. Number 42. What's the one thing that people always misunderstand about you?
I have been told that I have a resting bitch face. So I think I'm nicer than people think I am.
That's awesome.
Are we ending on that? We're ending on that note.
Yes, we are. And that's where our original episode ended. I reached out to Jaime just a few days ago to ask her how everything's been for her as a professor. Jaime, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great to see you. So obviously a lot has changed since we first spoke.
Yeah.
How has the pandemic affected you as an educator?
Well, I was lucky that the bulk of the pandemic has taken place during the summer, when I am not really teaching in person anyway. In the spring, like everyone else, we pivoted to online. So there was definitely a quick learning curve there. But we got through it, and I think we were all kind of crossing our fingers that we'd be back in the fall and this would be a very temporary situation. And of course, that is not what it's going to probably turn out to be.
Yeah.
So that's now where I'm at. How are we going to make the fall a decent experience for the students while also staying safe?
And at the time of this recording, you are scheduled to go back to in-person classes, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I was also planning to take students on a study abroad trip to Scandinavia in June, and that did not happen either, of course. So that was disappointing, but that was, there was no way that was going to happen. We kind of knew that pretty early on.
Jaime, I'm really curious, what is it like for you as a professor to teach a class online?
Well, I had never taught a class online before, unlike some of my colleagues. So it was something I had never really wanted to do, because I really enjoy interacting with my students and the face-to-face kind of casual things that happen in a classroom, and the rapport that you build, and how in the world do you translate that to screens. There were a lot of challenges. I'm lucky that I'm fairly technologically savvy. So making use of all the technologies was kind of okay. But even if you can do everything well technologically, how do you build a community? How do you connect with students? How do you make sure that they're kind of doing all right?
Wait, and how many students do you have in a class typically?
I had one class of 30, one class of 70, and one class of 30. So yeah, I had discussion boards online where, people had to comment on readings and respond to one another to try to generate dialogue. In the fall, students kind of know they're signing up for online classes, so we can kind of assume that they're going to be ready to meet at a particular time. So that's going to give us a little bit more flexibility in terms of, requiring conversation, requiring maybe small groups. And I just finished up a big writing project, actually. So I was using that as a way to procrastinate about thinking about the fall.
Another book?
It was a online kind of an audio book course. It was through audible.com and the Great Courses. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the Great Courses, but they're like just for personal betterment, things that people can learn about. They have photography, art history, film appreciation, all kinds of things. I can't even list them all, but this was a class on happiness. So I wrote these 10 kind of modules about how to become a happier person based on research. And then after we edit it a little bit and get it all in good shape, I have to go record it.
That's cool.
Which I have never done before. So that'll be fun, but that was kind of taken up a lot of my brain space. So that just got wrapped up, and now is the time to start really thinking about the fall. So
And are you prepared for if Corona takes a big spike and things get worse and they have to go back to quarantine for a while, are you prepared to make the switch back to online again?
Yeah, this is where my optimism has fallen short a little bit. I really don't think this is going to last, the in-person classes. I mean, I live in a college town. The students are already out partying. You drive down the main drag where all the college bars are, and they're just like hanging out all the time, packed together, not distancing at all. So this is before school even starts. You know, kids on the teams that are practicing now are testing positive already. I mean, it's not to say that we'll have 1 or 2 positive tests and close down completely, but I don't see it lasting very long. My own self, based on nothing much, I'm giving it about 3 weeks. So I'm kind of preparing to flip back to all online classes.
With COVID specifically, there are kind of 2 schools of thought. There's the one school of thought, which is we should be super cautious and we should stay at home until there's a vaccine and really be quarantined and all that stuff. And then there's the other school of thought, kind of a little more, I think I would dare say it's on the right side of things, which is let's just let the virus run its course. Let's take precautions, but we're all going to get it eventually. So just let it do its thing so we can get back to work and boost the economy. Where do you fall in that spectrum?
I'm a little more on the former of what you said. Let's all just stay home, but we can't all just stay home. I mean, people have to go to work. There are essential workers. Businesses can't just shutter. I mean, it's impossible. Like, it's an impossible situation, but I think we just have to be smart.
Yeah.
You know, we have to live our lives within these new parameters. There's always going to be, there's risk, right? If you never drive your car, you're never going to get in a car accident, but you're never going to see anything or do anything. So figuring out how to like accurately assess risk is not something that people have historically been very good at. And I think this is another time where we're just not doing a great job of that.
Well, I'm going to be optimistic and say we're going to figure it out like we always do as human beings. You know, we're pretty good at that. We're pretty good at, even though there's been problems in the past, whatever. A friend of mine who's a journalist said history leans liberal. And I agree with him. I think it does over time. So I think that we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm maintaining, despite what I just said, I'm maintaining my optimism until November, and then I will reassess.
Any prediction of who you think's going to win?
I have to say Biden's going to win. I just can't.
We hope.
I can't think of the alternative, honestly.
What's your personal prediction as to when you think this will all either settle or there'll be a vaccine and people will be out there traveling in the world regularly again? How long do you think it's going to take?
Oh, gosh. Your guess is as good as mine. I would say at least a year, right?
That's what I think. I think next summer things will be a lot better.
Yeah, I hope so. I have to decide if I want to teach the study abroad next summer. And right now I'm just like, I can't imagine recruiting students in the fall and trying to get their parents on board to pay for this very, very uncertain kind of experience. So I do hope it comes back soon, but I'm naturally an optimistic person, but hard to really feel too great about traveling right now.
And have you traveled at all yourself since the pandemic started?
I did. So my girlfriend and I went on an 8-day road trip from Virginia to Denver to pick up some dining room chairs that her brother had.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, he had these dining room chairs that were kind of in the family, and she had a new house and she wanted these chairs, and we were debating how in the world is she going to get them? How is he going to ship chairs? It just seems incredibly expensive. So we took a road trip. It was before things really kind of surged again with COVID. So we got in the car and felt mostly okay in hotels and in the places that we stopped.
And were you masked up whenever you went outside the car and stuff like that?
Definitely we were, but not, there were some places we landed that I thought, wow, have you heard about what's going on? It was a little surreal. The weirdest thing was that we were in a lovely town and we went into a shop that was like art prints and things. And the shopkeeper was this kind of old curmudgeonly guy. And he said, no masks in here. No, take them off. It makes me think you're robbers. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. And we left.
Yeah.
But that was very bizarre. That was very, very strange.
Well, let's talk additionally about George Floyd and all the protests and what happened. How did that hit your university and your area of the country?
Well, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, so we are not immune to racial tensions. In 2017, you might remember we had the protests, the Unite the Right rally that made national, maybe international news. So not to say we're used to it or we're ready for it, but it's this town has had these tensions in the news for a long time. When we were traveling, this was the week after George Floyd and a lot of the protests and things, and we went through St. Louis and we saw a lot of boarded up buildings that had been looted, and we saw a lot of how different cities were responding in a really, really short little snippet as we were passing through. And yeah, St. Louis was one place that really kind of struck us with the responses of people and how it really seemed to hit in terms of the buildings, and the just the feel of the place was really interesting to see.
And how has this affected you both personally and as a professor?
I think like many people who have a lot of white privilege, it's really made me question a lot of the things that I take for granted. It's really made me really try to think about, why is it so hard to talk about, and why do people get so defensive, and how, as an educator, and a psychologist who teaches, I actually teach a chapter on stereotyping and prejudice in my social psychology class. Like how am I going to change that in the fall? How am I going to do a better job for my students? It's always been a really difficult chapter for me to teach because, I am white, and I can present research in a very cold, objective kind of way. Like, this is what studies have shown, but it's hard for me to connect with it on the level I think I should be able to as an educator. So that challenge of, how do I educate myself? What are the kind of questions I want to ask myself and other people? It's really, for myself, and I hope for a lot of people, it's really opened up a lot of minds, and a lot of questions are being asked that maybe we were afraid to ask before. But it's just such a hard thing.
Do you have any guest lecturers come in to your class to speak?
I have in the past when it wasn't the COVID situation. I'm thinking about how to engage students more and how to give them a forum for talking about these things too, as opposed to just listening to me drone on about this study has shown this and this study has shown this. So I'm thinking about assigning books. Like, there's a whole, the reading list that people are posting that we should all be reading, maybe giving them a chance to read one of these books over the course of the semester and have like little discussion groups, probably on Zoom, because we can't really be in person to the extent that I'd like, but have small breakout discussion groups on Zoom where people talk about these books. I'll give them some questions ahead of time and just kind of get them talking about these issues instead of shying away from them, which is what a lot of people do.
And has the university sent you any prerequisites or guidelines for the fall of things that they want you to do as a university?
With regards to
systemic racism and education of these issues and things like that?
Not that has crossed my desk.
Okay.
No, we're getting a lot of, we're having things like, open town hall meetings on Zoom, and the speaker is going to speak on Zoom and you can tune in. But in terms of like the classroom situation, there are, we have like a Center for Faculty Innovation and things, and they've put together some programs on how to make your classroom more inclusive, how to make, how to foster these kinds of conversations. So yeah, there are some things. I haven't gotten like any kind of rules or mandates passed down to me.
So the university does provide resources though for educators to say these
they provide resources
that's great.
Yeah. And they expect us to kind of meet them halfway and seek these things out.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as someone who's obviously traveled as much as you have in the world, when you look at everything that's happening in America, how do you personally feel like we could move forward better as human beings?
I think, listening to each other, hearing each other's stories, we're so segregated, as a country. If there were ways to actually meet and connect with people of different racial groups, of different sexual orientations, of different ethnic backgrounds, and learn about them as people. I think that just building empathy, hearing people's stories.
I think that's great. I think first of all, the power of storytelling is obviously really incredible and has been such a important part of the human experience for thousands of years. And something that I often say is that I really feel like we've heard so many white stories for so long. And there are wonderful Black stories and Asian stories and Aborigine stories, and we should be hearing more of those, and we should be making more movies about these things. And I really hope that Hollywood and entertainment leans that way so that it's not just white stories for the most part in the world that get all the media and attention,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agree completely.
So some of the younger people that I talk to in person, freak out a little bit about everything that's going on. And I try to tell them, hey, I'm going to be 50 years old and I've been through a bunch of stuff in my life, and from a slightly older perspective, not that this isn't serious, of course it is, and I'm not diminishing it in any way, but this is the world and there's always something. So whether it's, September 11th or the Gulf War or Fukushima or swine flu, this is just the human life, that there is tragedy as part of our experience. And so a little bit of perspective, I think, is in order so that, in my opinion, people can take a step back and have a sense of calm, and from there try to push forward and make positive change. That's my stance. I'm wondering how you feel about that.
I agree. I definitely agree. I guess it's hard if people haven't been through a really challenging time. They can understand that cognitively, right? But to really feel it emotionally is a whole other kind of thing. But I have to remind myself that like my students, they don't remember September 11th, which blows my mind how young they are. But I mean, they've never lived through that. They may have seen some of the downstream effects of like the economic crisis in 2008. They may have had their own personal tragedies, but on a national scale of this magnitude, they've never experienced anything like that. I think one thing that makes this different is that, and something that I fear they're not understanding, is that we can do something about this one.
Absolutely.
Right? This isn't something that, we're worried about terrorist attacks or something that is completely out of our control. On an individual level, there is a lot that we can do. So I don't want them to, my bigger fear is that they feel helpless, or they feel like, this sense of powerlessness. And I worry that that's what we're going to see in a month when all the students come back to campuses. They don't really feel a sense of personal responsibility. And that's what I think we need to instill in them.
I actually agree completely. And I also try to instill in everyone I talk to that you do have a lot of power. And one of the greatest powers you have is to vote. And if you don't like the current administration, the way things are going, don't just vote for the president. Vote in local elections, get involved in local politics, start facilitating change on a smaller scale, because the people that run for mayor of your city eventually try to run for the president of the United States. And shit rolls uphill.
And also the power of norms, like the norms that they set in their communities is also really powerful. We just got an email today from our university about how we're not allowed to let students sit next to each other in our classrooms, even if they are living together. And they could easily say, well, we're together all the time. But a lot of that is just the power of norms, right? All the other students don't know that. They see these two kids sitting together and they suddenly think, oh, this is fine. This is what we do. You see a student not wearing a mask, and yeah, there's the health risk of it, but there's also the norm that they're setting, like, oh, maybe we don't need to do this.
Well, are masks mandatory at your university come fall?
Yes, masks and or shields, but masks and shields, I guess, are best. And it's a little awkward, as it is everywhere, I guess, in terms of how do we police this. We just got this email, call campus safety if a student refuses to wear a mask. So they do seem to be taking it pretty seriously. It would be best, I think, if there was like a social sanction against it. Like if the student isn't wearing a mask, their peers are like, put that thing on, right? Yeah. That's the most powerful thing of all. So yeah, all these social norms that are so powerful in governing behavior. That's fascinating to me right now. Well, just going into an establishment and not wearing a mask, like just depending on where you are in the country, how people look at you, how people make inferences about you as a certain type of person.
We went to Home Depot just the other day to grab some stuff for the house, and everyone's masked up. And at the door, if you don't have a mask on, they give you one for free. And then we're walking around, and here comes this old white man with his mask pulled down below his mouth, eating a Snickers bar, walking around Home Depot. And Jillian and I both looked at him, and we looked at each other. And honestly, I just felt like, man, I just want to kick your ass right outside the door, you stupid motherfucker, you know?
Yeah.
But just what a selfish person to feel like my Snickers bar is more important than people's health, you know?
It's crazy.
So, well, do you think that the human race will survive and have a bright future?
I do. I have to, right? What other choice do we have? Some days
the alternative sucks.
Yeah, the alternative is just too grim. I mean, just what keeps us going, what keeps us working and trying to improve ourselves and improve the world every day if we don't think this is going to end at some point. So yeah, I think that the world will be changed and our country will be changed, and I'm not entirely sure how or what that looks like. Nobody does. But yeah, I think that we will come through this. I have to think that. Some days it's harder to think that than others, but yeah, I'm naturally an optimistic person. So
great.
That's my tendency.
One of my favorite questions to ask people today is, if you were elected president of the United States tomorrow, what are the first 3 things that you'd do?
If I was elected as me, Jaime Kurtz, I would hire an entire army of people, I mean that in a non-militaristic way, to advise me on healthcare, on the climate, on the economy, on foreign policy, on all of it. I would get the best people together. Then I would, I'd want to hear people's stories. Like I said, I'd want to really understand not just the most privileged people in our society, the most vocal, the most in the public eye, but what do people want? What do people need? So certainly you can't talk to every single person in the country, but to get a cross section of people's desires, I'd want to hear people's stories. And third, I would take a nap, because all that would be very exhausting.
Are there any particular policy changes that you're passionate about more than others?
Well, healthcare right now, certainly healthcare is a huge one.
Do you believe we'll eventually have healthcare for everyone in the country?
I don't know. Depends. Yes. As an optimist, I'm going to say yes.
I do. I think we'll get there eventually. I think it's going to take some people losing their greed.
Yeah.
Overall, are you happy with the journey of life?
Of my life? Yeah.
If you could continue to live a healthy life, how long do you think you'd want to live?
What about all the other people in my life? Will they be there too?
Ooh, that's a good question, Jaime. I have never thought of that. Let's say no. They'll all live normal human lives, but you could live as long as you wanted. You're like the Highlander.
I'm gonna say 90.
Okay.
Yeah. My grandmother's 94 and she's really healthy, but we were at a party once. She's like, all my friends are dead. My husband's dead. My son's dead. Everyone's dead. I don't, heaven, hell. I just want to go where all my people are. And she just looks so sad.
Aww.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking of her a little bit.
Well, Jaime, what are you most passionate about in life right now today?
Right now today, I'm trying to focus on the people in my life and making sure they're okay. So like my mom just recently moved to Charlottesville where I live and doesn't really know the place, doesn't really know anybody here, and it's a pandemic. So like trying to make sure she's enjoying herself enough and being all right and kind of doing fun, safe things with her and just kind of spending time with my closest friends that I let myself see and my girlfriend. And
do you guys do socially distanced hangouts with friends and stuff?
Yeah, we've done a few, like sitting on somebody's big deck or in a backyard, that kind of thing. I've gone to a couple of wineries where you just are completely outside. I think it's about risk assessment at this point. It's been going on so long that sitting in the house every single day starts to be just as dangerous, I think, for your health. And not seeing people isn't good for our health either. So we assume a small amount of risk getting together, but in a safe, I think the safest way possible.
One question I wanted to ask you to jump back to your university is Charlottesville generally a progressive town or a conservative town? And is there diversity in the university and the work that you do?
Charlottesville is a very progressive town. Yeah. I mean, it is the South, but it is a little blue dot in a kind of a lot of red. And the University of Virginia, so I teach at James Madison, which is actually an hour away in a more rural area, which is one reason I live here in Charlottesville. So here we have the University of Virginia, and like most universities, it's, mostly it's very liberal. A lot of most universities are
That's
largely cool. Like 80% or 85% people who identify as liberal.
And then is there diversity in your work?
Yes, it is. There's a lot of gender diversity in my particular department, partly because it's psychology, and psychology tends to attract a lot of women. So in terms of gender breakdown, it might be about 50-50 or maybe even slightly more women. And in terms of ethnicity and race, it's pretty white. It is pretty white. We've had trouble retaining faculty of color.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think partly, because it is so white, which is a problem. It's like a catch-22, right? And the town that I actually work in is also very white and not, there's not a lot of ethnic restaurants, for instance. There's not a lot of diversity of beliefs as far as I know. I don't live there, so I'm not really an expert, but that's just kind of what I've heard from faculty who decided to leave. So that's something that we are working on and really having a lot of conversations about how to address that, because it's better for everybody. The students of color, it's great if they can find somebody that they can kind of relate to in that way and they don't feel like othered. But yeah, this is a problem.
What do you think overall is the purpose of life?
Love, to love, be loved. Someone else has said that before, but that's not original, but I'm going to go with it.
All right. I completely agree. I think love is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Jaime, thank you so much for coming in again and doing a quick follow-up with me. I really appreciate it. And I want to wish you the best of luck in the fall. I hope that things stay safe and you stay safe and everything goes great.
Yeah, good luck to you too.
All right, friends and listeners, Jaime's recipe is going to be on the website when that new section goes live later this year. But in the meantime, get your butts over to Amazon.com and check out her book, The Happy Traveler, Unpacking the Secrets of Better Vacations. It's by Jaime Kurtz, Kurtz. I seriously can't recommend it enough. It's an awesome read. And while I'm promoting stuff, guess what? Moonbird is now on Patreon, so please show your support for the show. Donate $1, $5, whatever you want. Patreon.com, Patreon/Moonbird. And if you want more Moonbird than that in your life, head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media at Memories of a Moonbird. Stay safe.